Perfect. So you're here and mic and fly mic. Yep.
Oops, sorry. Use this other microphone. It's too far. Good morning. Good morning. I don't know how to say good morning in Czech. Does anyone know how to say good morning in Czech? Can you go to the mic, say your name, and then good morning in Czech?
I'm sure there's somebody who can say it properly, unlike me, but Dobrý den, John Scudder.
Great. So this is the always exciting, never dull routing area open meeting. I'm sure all of you are here for that meeting, so I won't even tell you if you're not here for that meeting, go away. I know that probably people are outside in line waiting to come in as well. So I'm Alvaro, this is Aliyah. Deborah is somewhere. You probably want to reveal too many confidential information. Tell you where she is. This is the node well. Hopefully you have all noticed that the node well is slightly different this time. And for those of you who are chairs, you've actually put the new node well in your slides. We are going to have a discussion about this and some other IPR stuff a little bit later in the program. So we're not going to talk about it right now. There's also, we always project some other resources and tools, the routing area wiki, the routing area directorate, that we're going to have a report from them as well later. The blue sheets are going around, etc. As always, we want to ask to please review documents. The mission of the IETF is to make the internet work better. The tools that we have are documents that we produce for people to go implement, to go deploy, to go operate, to go do whatever they do with the RFCs. And high quality RFCs are important. And this is the job of everyone. The job of the people writing the RFCs, of the working groups themselves, of everyone in the working group, of the chairs, of the shepherds, of the ADs, of everyone else, of the directorate. So please Please review documents. There are more keys in your keyboard than plus and 1. Please use them as well. Please give us feedback. If, oh, here's Deborah. We're not going to ask her where she was, but, you know, you can imagine. Yeah. So feedback to ADs. If you have feedback, are there things we're doing well? Are there things we're not doing well? Please tell us. If you want to use the open mic time at the end, you can. If you want to talk to us individually, you can as well. If you want to talk to the NomCom, for example, you can as well. You know, that's always a good thing. Now the NomCom has been giving us feedback, even when we are not up for selection, for example. So the last NomCom period, the NomCom collected feedback pretty much for everyone and gave feedback back as well. So that's another way to do it, if you want to do that. The agenda, which I didn't update in my slides here, but is reflected on the online agenda, is this one that I'm going to show as soon that moves somewhere. I have a little duck and other things there. Is this agenda. So we're going through the administrivia stuff, of course. I said Lou is going to talk a little bit about the node well, the new node well. Adrian is going to talk about RC 6701, what sanctions are available, and why it's really, really important to declare IPR early. And then we're going to go into the lightning round of director reports and working group and BOF reports. And then we're going to have enough time at the end to discuss the future of the routing area, the future of the world, anything else you want to discuss then, including, of course, as I said before, feedback to the ADs, to the area, to anything you want. So the area hasn't changed much in the last since last time. We haven't closed any working groups. Yeah, we haven't closed any working groups. We haven't created any working groups, and we didn't in the last period recharter any working groups.
Did you think you were showing slides?
I think I could, yes. It's not showing here either. I don't know what's happening. So here we go. Hold on.
We also haven't changed the assignments of responsible ADs to any of the working groups. Things have been pretty static, but that's not necessarily how we see things going in the longer 18-month plus time.
Yeah, so we see many working groups, progressing. There's probably a couple of working groups that in the short term we could close or finish the work. And we see, working groups that are ready maybe for recharter, that we should be talking about that as well. So, the working group in general, I think, is progressing. We just haven't done many upward changes. We do have a BOF today after lunch that is in the routing area. It's called the ideas BOF. Hopefully one of the chairs is here to talk in the lightning round, so we can talk about it there. That's it. So in case you don't know who your AD is, again, this is Aliyah, Deborah, and me, Alvaro. And those are our assignments right now. This, of course, can change, or we can shuffle chairs around, or anything else we feel like.
So one of the issues that came up last IETF as a result of some of the work that was happening in NetMod, eagerly anticipated work, I should say. Sorry, this question? Okay. So one of the pieces that came up was discussion on how to handle the revised data store or the NetMod network management data store architecture, NMDA, which I think is demonstration that I'm not the only one who can't come up with good acronyms. How to handle guidance for Yang models going forward. Because on the one hand, we now have a really great planned architecture for how to handle different data stores. And so what this means is things between, the configuration, being able to see what was written, but not necessarily so the intended to be able to see that the operational state is to have what, when you go and look at them, are actually simpler, much more easy to read Yang models that aren't forced to depend on things like lots of groupings. But that technology also needs netconf and restconf extensions in order to be implementable. And we all know there's an implementable lag, there's an implementation lag. I would like to see the existing IETF models able to get finished and go out, but RFCs are carefully chiseled into stone, and so we had this dilemma of how to handle it. So we decided, after quite a lot of discussion, that what we are recommending is, if you're doing a Yang model, it should follow the NMDA structure. And for many models, that works just fine. There's not a need for a distinction between the configuration state and operational state. However, for some models, depending upon what's being modeled, it does matter. And for those, we can have another module in the appendix, which gives the state information, so that it's possible to do that until the revised data store work has been fully defined as far as the functionality in netconf and restconf, which is really far along, and in fact before that has a chance to get implemented. So the Yang model should be fully usable with being able to access the information needed. Now, the hey, it should do NMDA is something that it's a should, because this is the IETF, and we're all really well aware that each example and use case, each particular model may have some differences and unique reasons. So we're certainly happy to talk about it, but this is the recommendation. Rob Wilton gave a very nice presentation on some of the details of this in RTGWG. And if you haven't tragically seen that, then if you're interested, I would really recommend looking at it. And if you have any questions, I guess I'm the AD to hunt. Thanks.
Any questions on this or anything else that we've touched on up until now? Did you all have coffee already? I would like to propose that we assign someone to bring the AD's coffee for next meeting. Anyone want to volunteer for that? Thank you, Adrian. Adrian offered me half of his cup. I'm a glass half full person, so I'm happy about that. At least someone replied, which is all I can ask for these days. Okay, so we're going to go into our next topic in the agenda, which is Lou talking about the new NodeWell. And Lou, we have a clicker here. Awesome. Hopefully it will work.
So I got stuck talking about this in MPLS, and I guess it was interesting enough to end up being asked to do it here. Obviously, I need coffee too, by the way. Should have definitely all gone some. So we have a new NodeWell. If we look at it, you'll see that it looks a lot like the old one. So what are the significant changes? The most significant change on this page is that we are now pointing to RFC 8179 rather than the old RFC. So there's a new document covering IPR disclosures in the IETF. That means there's a new document to be familiar with. That document updates a number of items in a way that is intended to provide clarification to the disclosure rules based on questions that have arisen since the original document was published. I did talk to the authors about sort of helping educate the folks on the details. They've posted a nice blog that identifies the areas that have been updated, but they don't say what's been updated. The plan is for George, who's the lawyer for the IETF, to prepare a detailed presentation on that and actually discuss it in Singapore. I'm not sure where it's going to be presented in Singapore, but if you're really interested in being walked through the details as well as ask questions about the details of 8179, there'll be an opportunity there. But what are the key takeaways? Number one, there's some clarification on what is a contribution. They've written up, I mentioned that the authors wrote up a little blog. One of the things they mention there is anything that you do to contribute to the process or to provide input to the process that we follow here in any of the forums that we provide, that includes rooms like this, our email, our Jabber, any electronic media, any personal media. In any of those forums, any contribution, even as something as subtle as a frown in a public forum, can be taken as a contribution. So for example, John just contributed by sort of smiling at my comment. Now it turns out I don't have any IPR on this, so it's not a big deal. But if I was talking about a technical idea and he smiled and that was taken by maybe the chairs as support, and he knows of some IPR that's related to this, and the reason he's smiling is, yeah, that's my thing, I'm going to get it advanced. He just contributed, and he would, under the new rules, be obligated to disclose. So the document also tries to be pretty explicit on what do you do if you don't want to disclose or can't disclose. We've all come into situations, or many of us have come into situations where we know that there of some technology that we personally are patenting, or that the company we work for, or that someone we're working with has a patent on the process, and they don't want to talk about it. What do we do then? That's going to happen. This is clarified in the document. It basically says you can't contribute at all. You can't smile or frown when that discussion has taken place. When that occurred with me personally, I never entered the room that the working group was discussing that idea that I was working on. I didn't subscribe to the mailing list. I occasionally read archives, but in no way did I contribute in that area. That was my personal take on how to deal with the situation. You all should read the document, become familiar with it, and decide what your own personal take is on how to deal with compliance with your IPR disclosure responsibilities. One other thing the document does that the previous document did not do is point to RFC 6701, which covers sanctions of what can the IETF do when someone doesn't comply with their disclosure responsibilities. Adrian's actually going to talk about that a little bit. The one thing I want to talk about, the last thing I want to mention, is what is the responsibility of an IPR holder? So someone who is not a participant in the IETF, but holds IPR. What is their responsibility to the IETF process? Turns out it's nothing. They have no responsibility to disclose their IPR. They have no responsibility to come to the IETF and talk about it. They have no responsibility to say that the thing you're doing directly matches my patent. We can't compel anyone to do anything who is not involved in our process. What we can do is tell contributors, folks in the room, what their responsibilities are. And then if they don't comply with their responsibilities, take steps based on that. And with that, we're going to hear from Adrian, who's going to talk about those steps. Any questions before I run away? Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Adrian?
I'm Adrian. I have more slides than Lou, but promise to be quicker. Given how full the room is, maybe the ADs, if the ADs think this is an important topic, there may be other fora for distributing the information. So, I am not a lawyer. That's actually quite important for me to say for my own protection and for you to be aware of. And I'm also not studying law. So, this is important legal stuff. It affects your life. Protect yourself and your employer. Your employer probably has somebody responsible for all this. Use them, get advice, find out what process you should be following, and use them to file disclosures on your behalf so that you can hide behind them while still fulfilling your requirements. So why sanctions? The point is that we want people to disclose. All disclosures are good because they help us understand what we're building and why, but late ones can be disruptive. We might have to go back and revisit work, but they're still better than no disclosure. Very late disclosures, for example, disclosures that come only after an RFC has been published, can actually be really disruptive. We may have to return stuff to the working group. We may have to respin an RFC with completely different mechanisms. But they're still better than no disclosure because still you actually know what IPR is out there. So what do we do? Well, what does it mean when somebody files a late or a very late disclosure, or when they completely fail to disclose? Well, firstly, it shows a lack of respect. It shows a lack of respect for the IETF, for the people who work here, for the industry, and in my opinion, it shows a lack of respect for the work that an individual is doing. It can be really disruptive because we've invested a lot of time and energy in a particular solution, and now we need to go back and decide whether we do it all again. It may trick us into making a particular protocol choice that we thought we were making, like on a toss of a coin, but actually if we'd known about the IPR, we'd have gone a different way. It may actually be bad in law, and I'll come on to that in a moment. And just essentially, it's an abuse of the IETF process. By being here, you have signed up to follow the IETF process. So what do we do about that? RFC 6701 describes some sanctions that can be applied by the IETF to people who abuse the IPR process. It's pretty clear that the punishment should fit the crime. Okay, so we have so far not had any executions for violation of IPR rules, but there have been cases where minor things have been done. The decisions and punishments are made by the working group chairs working with their ADs for support. And if you're a working group chair and this sort of thing happens, I strongly advise you talk to the AD straight up so that you've got backing for whatever you do. And you should also talk to the individual concerned because they may have a legitimate reason why something went wrong and you don't want to punish them too strongly. Well, you might want to, you might enjoy it, but you shouldn't. So what might happen in the IETF? 6701 has got this long list that ranges from just having a chat to having a chat in public so that everybody knows it's happened, or even a reprimand, some form of name and shame that can actually be really quite powerful. You might move on, especially with the repeat offenders, to say, well, you're not going to actually edit any more working group drafts, or we're not going to accept any drafts that come from you because you've blown it too often. And you might remove somebody from editing position. You might even deprecate their RFCs. And at the far end of this, people can be banned from mailing lists. And that starts with a temporary ban, which I think is 30 days from a working group mailing list, and escalates to a year-long ban from a working group list, which can then be picked up automatically by other IETF lists. So it becomes a full IETF one-year ban. And in absolute extreme cases, that can be made into a permanent but revisitable ban from IETF mailing lists. So we can, at the top end of this, say, you just messed us about too often, no more participation. There may be mitigation, but a lot of mitigation, I think, is fragile excuses. So there really is no excuse under the law, and the law is you will declare if you're making a contribution. But stuff happens, so every situation has to be looked at. Unreasonable excuses I have heard. I forgot. Oh, you forgot. That's still a violation. I forgot about this patent. Well, whose patent was it? You have a duty to remember. I have so many patents, I can't be expected to track them all. Well, actually, you can be expected to track them all. You are expected to. If you believe you've got this problem, that you're so prolific in patents, then stop being prolific in the IETF. You can't have both. Nice one. I asked my company to disclose, but they didn't. Well, what you're promising to do when you participate is that a disclosure will happen in a reasonable amount of time. So when that reasonable amount of time expires and your company has still not disclosed, get out. Or file a third-party disclosure against your own company. That's kind of fun. But that happens when you move to a new company. Okay, you wrote a patent with company X, you're now at company Y. You can't influence company X to disclose that patent, but you know about it. You can either do a third-party disclosure saying, I believe company X may have IPR. That's all you have to say. Or don't participate. And the last point is that courts may also apply sanctions. So this is why your employer really needs to pay attention. Because in the end, patents may come to court, and courts have been known to be quite aggressive when they hear that a standards body's procedures have been violated. They can do things like force the patent holder to license at very cheap terms, or they can even strike down a whole patent. So this patent is no longer valid. And so your employer probably doesn't want to mess with the courts, because the whole point of them having IPR is to use it profitably. I will also accept questions or coffee. Lou is going to get me coffee. Damn, it's a question.
What would you like in your coffee?
Water, please.
Hi, Lou Berger. I realize I forgot to say something, so I'll ask you the question. When am I obligated to disclose when I know that my contribution is covered by my company's IPR or anyone's IPR?
I believe that George has used the words as soon as reasonably possible.
So this is a good discussion for George. We should ask him. But I think it says before you actually make the contribution, or as you're making the contribution. So I think that's interesting, and I think we choose as, in the response as chairs, to be a little more lenient, but I think the rules say as soon as you are making the contribution, you're supposed to be making the declaration.
That's interesting. We may have tightened that up, and certainly,
exactly. I think this is one of the changes.
If you observe that and say, I will always disclose before I contribute, then you're safe.
Daniele Ceccarelli. Suppose I have a patent on an area, a given area. I don't believe my patent is impacting that work, but the IETF does. Is there a contact point I can check with? As a contributor, not as a chair, or... And how can I know that the IETF believes there's my IPR is impacting your work?
What's really interesting about this is that should never occur, because the IETF should never make a judgment on whether or not IPR applies. That's whether a disclosure has been made or it hasn't been made. That's not for the IETF to decide. Now, another individual may go look at a patent and do a third-party disclosure on you, saying, hey, this IPR exists, I found it, and I think it applies. But we won't judge that. It's not the IETF's role to judge the applicability of a patent. That's court's job.
So I'm Lou Anderson. I have a question, I think, to Adrian. If we say that, or maybe Lou, I don't know. If we say that we need to disclose as soon as you make a contribution, does that really mean that we should do an IPR poll on every new document that actually is sent to the working group?
So this is 6702, which is discusses measures to ensure that people are conforming to the IPR rules. And 6702 is really clear that you do not ever need to do an IPR poll on anything. Okay? So working group chairs are applying 6702 differently depending on how they feel that their working group has been burnt in the past. Some of them don't do IPR polls at all because you will notice that by being named on a draft, you've already made the commitment. Some don't do polls at all because the note well, when you sign up, everything, you see the note well, so you've already made the commitment. But others are doing IPR polls at key times just to remind people. So back to your question, should we do an IPR poll every time Loa pulls a face in the room? I suspect,
yes, please.
I think that would be disruptive to our process.
Yeah, that's where I'm going.
One couple additional things. It's the working group chair's call on how that's run today. There is a question in the Shepherd write-up that asks about I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it is there IPR and have you asked if there's IPR? So there is some obligation for the Shepherd, it's not on that working group chair actually, on the Shepherd to ensure that the disclosures, that everyone has followed the disclosure process. So how do they ensure that? The only way I know how to do it is by asking.
It's actually only applied to authors and contributors. It's not to the working group members in general.
I don't believe that's true. That may be how it's... So we just heard from Joel saying that the text is as Loa just characterized. The obligation, though, on IPR disclosure applies to anyone who contributes on a particular topic. So if you contribute on a topic, you have that obligation, whether or not you're just sitting in the room or you're the editor, you're the author. The obligations are the same according to, what is it, 8179, whatever the new RFC number is.
So, slightly other subject. When we have, if we actually ban someone from a mailing list because of IPR disclosure violations, we actually stop that person from doing kind of future IPR disclosure. So it's something that is kind of a bit blunt. If we know that that person has more than one document in the working group, if I ban him, he can't make a disclosure on the other.
So I just made a contribution there, which people who are watching my face will have noticed. That's not the case. The disclosures are made by made through the web page for disclosing. So you can do that, and you can obviously read any mailing list and see what's going on, so you can be aware.
So, Adrian, is that true for third-party disclosures also?
Okay,
thanks.
Sorry, before you ask your question, I just want to say real quick that it is true, yes, we don't have to ask everyone. It has been, I think, a practice in the area, which I think is a good practice, to remind people whether they have anything to disclose at key moments. Many working groups, it's been my experience, adoption, working group last call, that should be enough to remind people that they need to disclose, right, in case whatever happened. So I just want to say that I think we believe that this is a good practice and something that those of you who are already doing it should continue to do.
So, yeah, I know. Keir Patel, Arcus. I actually think it's a good practice for working groups to make this call earlier, because as it stands today, you can have a standard that could very well be an IPR by a company and an implementer. It would be great for implementers to know if there is such a case, then how do they go about handling such situations. So a working group would be a right place.
Right, and operationally, I think as to follow on what Alvaro said, when he said key moment, there's a tendency to do that at adoption and at last call, and that sort of covers both.
So the question is, there's usually delta about 3 to 18 months between filing IPR and it appears first time online. So I've witnessed there's possibility after declaring IPR, which is unavailable online. So it's unavailable in general to say, I don't know what your IPR is, but I don't like it, so I want you to document the progress till it's available, which could take any time afterwards.
So I think you're alluding to, what does a working group do if IPR is disclosed? And whether or not you can read it or not, the process is the IETF doesn't discuss the substance of the disclosure, whether the validity of it. Now, working group participants are more than welcome to take whatever steps they think are appropriate to then voice an opinion on whether or not they support the work. That has been covered by an IPR disclosure. Some groups really want to push towards sort of open licensing. I know this has been in the security area. They have they've intentionally avoided encumbered technologies. That's been the choice of that group, of the groups doing that work. In a particular working group, if there's an IPR disclosure, the group can decide whether or not it wants to proceed with the technology, with the draft, with based on that IPR disclosure. It's a working group consensus process. It's not about the validity of or the applicability or the correctness or necessarily even all the details. Certainly it's helpful for people to form their opinions based on what the details are. But in terms of our process, we're not going to discuss those details. We'll only discuss whether there's consensus on a document, on moving a document forward.
So I think part of your point, Jeff, is that it's impossible to engineer a solution around IPR that you can't see.
Exactly.
So one of the influencing factors that individual participants may consider when deciding whether or not to engineer around a solution is what the licensing terms are. Now, for clarity, I am not seeking to influence the way that companies license their IPR. However, if the license that comes along with a piece of IPR that you can't see says, if you implement this, we will come and take your firstborn, then it's likely that people are going to try to engineer around it. Whereas if the license says, hey, you know what, we've got IPR, but you can have it for nothing, then people are probably not going to try to engineer around it. So that comes into the mix when looking at this. But we still have that problem. If somebody discloses, I've got IPR here, but I'm not telling you what it is, then it's a problem. Yeah. Life is a problem.
So before we run off stage, just a reminder, you just have two people talking about their personal opinions here. Talk to your company attorneys, read the documents for yourselves, and if you have questions and want to hear from the IETF's attorney, that'll happen in Singapore. But right now you've just heard from two individuals, not anything beyond that.
Sue him.
Right. Even though we may wear certain hats in the IETF, we're just two individuals talking our personal perspectives. Thanks.
Thank you. And when you consider your legal options, remember that I didn't actually say anything. You guys agree with me, so good. That's a good thing. And my jokes are not protected by any IPR. You may repeat them at any time you want. You like that? Good. Okay, so now We're going to go into the exciting world of working group updates. And we're going to go to the wiki. Can you say something?
Sure. So I noticed that despite my requests, Babel hasn't filled itself out yet. Do we have a Babel chair in the room to give their report? Oh, thank you, Russ. Excellent. Now I don't have to ad-lib.
You don't have to yell at me? Well, I thought it was already filled out, so there you go. That's our coordination. We need a better coordination between Babel. What happened in the working group this week is we decided to go offline to talk about unicast hellos. That meeting's happening today. We agreed on a consensus around several changes to the Babel drafts for the BIS, and pretty much that's it. We're moving forward. There was a presentation about beer in Babel, or Babel, but we decided to sideline that until to think about it more before we call for working group adoption or anything, until we see requirements and stuff like that. So pretty simple meeting, lots of energy in the room, lots of really cool ideas being floated. So.
Bess is next. Neither Martin or Thomas could be here today. They are here, however. So the working group is making progress, as usual, with the very clear and straightforward EPPM and VPN type documents. This is one of the type of documents that I would encourage everyone to go read. They're very, very inspiring. There's work going on, of course, new work in support on NVO3 and Yang models and everything else. You can read the numbers up there. BFD.
So since we'd like to get through this quickly, I'd request folks who are the networking group chair for the next alphabetical working groups to start queuing up or being prepared. Thanks.
We could make this take longer. So BFD is not meeting this IETF. The work that we have in progress right now is the multi-point documents we're going through working group last call. We've got some feedback on there, and we're waiting to hear from an implementer in terms of what their implementation does in terms of matching the spec. We're having some issues with the BFD Yang module in terms of how it interworks with the IGP modules. As the IGP chairs will point out, we've gone back and forth on this a few times. The solution that's currently in both documents is neither of them will actually talk to each other. This actually has to be addressed. And we'll try to get a short virtual interim after the session. We had some fun in the MPLS session about the BFD directed feature. This is partially an issue in IPR, partially a matter of whether or not the working group thinks it's a useful feature, and potentially a change to 5884. There are also two other drafts for BFD that are being presented in the MPLS session this Friday.
Beer. Sure. Greg is here, don't worry.
I'm here. Can you open up so I can read?
You put nothing in there.
That's not true.
I just refreshed it. Well, let me refresh it again.
We just had this dialogue. I put this up. That's bizarre. Huh. All right. We have a bunch of drafts that are actually coming out of the last call now. We have one in the queue, which is the architecture draft. We've got one outstanding discuss on that I think has been addressed really well by the list and the authors, but whoever's got the name of the discuss hasn't really fed back yet. The other point that's probably going to be launched now from the group is our work towards justifying move from experimental to standards. Just following the charter information, getting the draft in place, reaching the full 4 bullet points that are from there, and then feedback from the field. I put it up this morning.
I know.
There was an edit merge that took place when I first did it. Someone else had it, and then I merged it and saw the diffs.
I believe you.
It's okay.
On the merge, so we're not obvious. I think they don't.
It was pre-coffee.
So please remember that we're in the middle of the week. So ideally, you maybe put information even before you meet. So some of you may actually have to go and refresh some of this.
Right.
So yeah, it's okay. Thanks.
Daniele Ceccarelli for SICAM. I'm happy to see that our contribution is the right part of the branch, of the merge. So we're meeting twice, as usual. We have a joint young session with other working groups of the routing area, TIS, MPLS, and PCE. This time is hosted by TIS. We are meeting on Thursday, afternoon session 1, and immediately after with our SICAM dedicated session. Highlights, we still have 2 design teams, one for microwave, one for transport and BI. The microwave design team is doing pretty well, going faster. They had 2 deliverables. Both documents are now working group documents. They also participated to the hackathon, and they won as best contribution. Regarding the transport and BI, we have 2 documents now. We are in the process of adopting them. Young models, we have a huge number of drafts for optical, OTN, IP over WDM, and we recently adopted also the OTN topology and the tunnel models, which are an augmentation of the TIS document, the T topology and the T tunnel models. Status, we have 1 draft in the editor queue. It's been there for a while because we decided to put it on hold and have a more generalized work in TIS and make this work depend on that. A lot of liaisons, we write a lot. 1 outgoing to the ITUT for Flex Ethernet, and 3 incoming liaisons on Flex Ethernet, OTNT from ITU and BBF.
Okay, Pat Thaler, DetNet. So the focus for this meeting is moving forward on the data plane. We think we're converging on pseudowire MPLS and IP over 802.1 TSN. We're also looking at the definition of the service parameters, and we're talking about the traffic treatment that's required. And we're going to have discussions on security, and there's also a little demonstration of the DetNet data plane actually providing protection for failover. So there's a cute little Lego robot that is balancing, and we show that, yep, we can keep from losing the packets and keep the robot balanced without falling over when we take a link down. So that's basically it.
I'm IR2S. We had 2 sessions this week. We have 2 main data models, Topology and RIB. RIB has both info model and regular model. They're both past working group or working group last call. We are grateful to the Yang doctors who are reviewing, and we hope to have this back at the ISG and approved. That's our hope. There are interest in 2 new data models, a fabric and a split between data plane and user. We need 2 editors for 2 main documents. So our second half of the session was an editing, to which again we are grateful to the new revised data store team that came and gave us lots of suggestions. I am looking for a few editors or authors for the 2 main documents for the ephemeral data store and for a RESTconf thing. If you're interested in working on that, please see me. The second session will merely be an editor session. I will be there, but we will probably change the location. I'll probably just be at the registration desk looking for an editor. Please contact me. Most of these documents are done, and we think if we just have a long editing session, we can close it off here. Okay, I guess I need to step aside and wait for the ideas BOF, and then I'm just going to stand here because I'm IDR.
Okay, it looks like the ideas BOF chairs are not here. Tim Musinski and Brian Haberman are the chairs for that BOF, which is going to happen this afternoon, right after lunch at 1:30. I'm not sure where. So like any other BOF, why are we here? We're going to talk about the problem statement, some discussion about what needs to be done, and then this is intended to be a working group forming BOF. So the normal questions are going to be asked. Is the problem statement clear? Is this work that the IETF should do? Who's going to actually do the work? And then we'll see where we go from there. So please go to the ideas BOF this afternoon.
Okay, IDR. IDR is Thursday, 9 to 12. Our topics we still are considering trying to respond to operators and make sure we're getting through things. I sat again at the GROW working group, and we found we're still not getting through some of the things the operators need. So again, we encourage operators to be there and tell us what we need to do. We're trying to get rid of squatting by early allocation or changing allocation. So please come and see the chairs list. We really have things on the list on BGPLS. John's got a really good discussion thread there. If you want to talk about it, John's here, and he'll take care of it. Say, John. Okay. Other things we're going to talk about are flow spec. Our flow spec V1 had, again, operator input, and we believe that the revision that now makes it, clears up any spec problems is ready for working group last call. We have BGP tunnel attributes, route server, BFD interaction to make sure link loss at IXP is taken care of. Route, that should be route leak, not lead prevention. I need more coffee. And we have new work that's either reviewing GROW stuff on congestion or fib or link logical. Come and see the new work and listen. This is a good IDR as we have a little extra time this time, so come and ask questions. Bye.
Yeah, so ISIS met on Monday. Oh, date time. Oh, I left that on there. I guess the biggest item would be that we're discussing combining Ospf and ISIS again. Seems like the last time we did this, ISIS had a lot more sort of separate stuff, and we have a lot more overlap lately with segment routing. So that's one of the reasons that we're looking at that, also to get cross-pollination between the two. So we talked about this in the working group, and it was surprising sort of 50-50 split on whether people wanted to do it or not. There were a lot of opinions. I'm sure that will carry over maybe into the list. In the meantime, the plan is to run an experiment, and we're going to try to combine the lists. It's appearing to be harder than we thought it would be. But yeah, we'll figure something out. So ISIS mail will go to Ospf, Ospf mail will go to ISIS, and hopefully not loop. And then we'll run a combined session, not just a back-to-back session so everybody can leave after the first one that doesn't care about the second one. And then we'll see how people feel about it and whether it seems like it works or it's a hassle or whatnot. And we can go from there. The other things I guess of note are we have 2 new RFCs, the auto configuration, and then the BIS update to multi-topology. And also we have something that the L2 bundles is about to go RFC. It's in this ref.
L2 TPEXT, I don't see anybody here. They're not meeting. They had 1 new RFC, and that was on their IPv6 tunnel.
Okay, LISP met on Monday at 1:30. We've had 1 RFC recently published. Very many thanks to our ADs and to the RFC editor and to Ayana, because we ran into a little code point allocation problem, and everybody worked together to solve it, so that was great. We've got one document under final IESG review, one in working group last call, bunch of things we've adopted for interesting work. The real key is those two main documents right there, 6830 bis and 6833 bis. Both are in good shape, are progressing. Our goal is to get those to proposed standard, and we are hoping to hand those up soon. I don't know what soon means yet, per Adrian's screed somewhere, but we're trying. That's the thing that is currently the high priority for the working group, and so we're going to do that. There's some individual drafts. There have been some individual drafts that requested adoption, and not enough people spoke up, and so we said, well, okay, they're still individual drafts.
Manet, I don't see Justin or Stan here. Manet didn't meet this time. I do have to say that the same as there are IPR possible sanctions for not disclosing, there are possible sanctions for not filling out the wiki. And one of them that Adrian mentioned as effective is naming and shaming. So I'm officially publicly shaming Justin and Stan for not filling out their status here. At least in the other cases where the status was not filled, the chair was able to stand up. Here, nothing. Double shame to them. So in any case, Manet did not meet. There's steady progress on DLEP extensions that have been, I think, making good progress in the mailing list. I don't know if you guys are standing there because you have to say something about Manet or not.
Both chairs, this is Lou Berger or Rick Taylor, we were going to say the same thing. Neither chair is here, but we're both here working on some other things, and so we're talking hopefully about DLEP extensions. So there's stuff going on this meeting, even though the chairs are not holding a session.
So it's great that work is making progress. That's what is expected. Still, third round of public shaming for not filling out. Thank you.
Radio. Okay, so I'm Lou Anderson speaking for MPLS. We have had a couple of things that has been kind of rocking things a bit. George couldn't travel and our secretary couldn't travel this time. George because of financing, I think, and Tarek because of weather. It was raining in Toronto. So we had one session yesterday. Nick and I think we actually could made it through that session acceptable level. We have a new session on Friday. We can just continue on the agenda. And on Thursday, we have the joint session on gang models. So in that first session we discussed one document, and I didn't want to be particular, but Jeff already mentioned it. It's a BFP-directed document. We discussed the IPR process, and I think we are closing on that one. And we have technical comments on the document that we haven't closed yet. We also have quite a bit of new work coming in, not like it was like 5 years ago, but it's actually picking up. New DAOs coming in pretty good shapes. We have 3 new RFCs since last time, and interestingly enough, we have 2 drafts that are very interesting for the MPLS working group coming out of PALS. And if we look at the list, we have about 20 documents updated since Chicago. Thank you.
Hi, Matthew Bocci for NVO3. So we're meeting this afternoon at 3:20. We've made quite a lot of progress now on data plane encapsulation. So the working group has kind of selected draft Geneve for a standards track solution within the working group. The last IETF, we held an experiment and held some round tables, discussions on control plane security and data plane related work. And the security work, certainly, security roundtable was quite productive and has resulted in some new drafts in the working group that we are discussing this afternoon around requirements and architecture and solutions for security with Draft Geneva. We also, another thing of note is that we tried to adopt a couple of drafts that were an output of the routine working group overlay OEM design team. And there was quite a lot of pushback in the working group to adopting these, mostly regarding the desirability of a common header across different encapsulations and whether or not this is really necessary. We're currently trying to resolve this issue in the working group. So just a quick status update. One new RFC since the last IETF use cases for DC VPNs, and the MVO3 multicast framework is currently with Leah.
AC Lindum. We met yesterday. We had a nice intimate meeting adjacent to MPLS. Chris already covered the fact that we're going to have a truly joint meeting in Singapore as an experiment with the topics interleaved. For instance, if we have segment routing or attributes, we talked about attribute reuse or things like that. We talk about both protocols back to back. In terms of Ospf specific highlights, the extended attributes for Ospf v3, we have two implementations. We're going to proceed toward publication on that, and that's really a great milestone because then we'll get to a truly TLV-based protocol, not only for the LSAs we've added in recent years, but the base LSAs. The TE attribute, we've been discussing this for a long time. We have a meeting to talk about how we get consensus forward. Let's see, it's tomorrow. That's an ongoing discussion. And we didn't have any new RFCs, but I think the segment routing draft is ready for AD review again, and the tunnel end cap draft is also ready for AD review again.
Andy Malice for PALS. We've actually had some work of interest come up lately. There's been some problems observed in the field with Ethernet pseudowires as a result of some implementations or operators not using the control word on Ethernet pseudowires, with the result that some MAC addresses in the embedded Ethernet frames are being looked at by the router and being identified incorrectly as IPv4 or IPv6, with the result that ECMP is being applied to Ethernet flows, which is the wrong thing to do. So we're working on a draft to make sure that people are aware that you really do need to be using the control word for Ethernet pseudowires. And the two co-chairs of the working group are the co-authors in this draft. So Matthew Bocci has agreed to be the shepherd for this draft and to run the process. Other than that, we had one other thing come up in our meeting on Monday. That was a proposal for a pseudowire Yang data model. However, I have to thank the BEST working group, because the BEST working group has been very happy to work on a unified Yang data model for both L2VPN and pseudowires. So we spoke to the authors of this proposal and tell them to basically fold in their work with the ongoing work in BEST, so we don't have multiple solutions going on for the same problem. Other than that, we've been extremely prolific and working towards shutting down. Since November 2015, the last year and 3 quarters, we've published 14 RFCs. We have 4 more that are coming out soon. And right now we have no other working group drafts, but the one on Ethernet pseudowires will be the last one, we think. And after that, we'll be talking to Deborah about the future of the working group.
Julien Maric, Pass Computation Element Working Group. We had a meeting yesterday evening colliding a bit with the bus departure for the social. Anyway, it was an interesting meeting. One of the major events related to the PC Working Group is the change of secretary. Daniel King has stepped down, so we thank him for the work. And Rev Doddy has agreed to be our new secretary, so thank to him too. Main topic discussed yesterday, the use of the PC as a central controller, some work related to the stateful PC extensions and the hierarchical ways of using the PC, some optical specific extensions, and we may also mention the disagreement that ended the session yesterday that may require some talk with Deborah, who's already aware of the topic there. From the administrative perspective, we haven't published any RFC since the previous meeting, but we really think we will have a bunch of them before the next IETF, because we have 4 in the RFC editor queue, 3 with the IESG, and some other coming up in the near future. So we hope that, considering dependency between a set of the documents there, they will be released soon and published as RFCs. Thanks.
So protocols for IP multicast are still alive and well, for better or for worse. We met yesterday morning with MBOND Ops group back to back. We've done that for several IETFs now, and it's worked quite well. I foresee us continuing to do that. On the ops side, a lot of interesting use cases for multicast and discussions about deprecating ASM and Wi-Fi multicast. And on the protocol side, PIM, a lot of progress happening on Yang. We have publication requested for both PIM and IGMP MLD Yang drafts. There may need to be some update with new Yang config formats happening, but they are progressing. A couple new documents that are progressing. Stig presented a draft that appeared to be well received with regards to accessing an IPv4 prefix over an IPv6 next hop, and when there's multiple RPF neighbors that are v4 neighbors, how do you choose? So that's interesting new work. So otherwise, we plan to meet again in Singapore. Thank you.
Hi for all. We're going to meet tomorrow in the afternoon, and then we have a working group last call and document, like a use case for use of Ripple info, where we add some updates to RFC 6553 and 6550. So we want the working group to decide if they agree or not. And then we are working in the working group topics that we have recharted. And we have the syslaw routing header finished. That is the RFC 8138. Okay, so the topics that we recharted and we are working currently is like constraint multicast, source routing multicast for Ripple, DAO projection, DAO modifications, ODB Ripple. They're going to be presented tomorrow, and we are not going to present like this modification and YAG model for MPL this time. Additionally, we are going to have a related internet draft presented tomorrow as well. It's about the parent selection. Okay, thank you.
Routing, we are meeting twice. IETF highlights good progress in Yang models, the presentation routing in data center, progressing on segment routing fast convergence. There's going to be presentation on VPN Plus, which has to do with slicing and some other stuff. So we also have short presentations, an informational draft Yari and myself put together to talk about systematic approach to latency, which definitely affects routing. Status, we've got one new RFC, Yang model for keychain. 2 drafts are with ISG. We are going through working group last call on Young routing types, and there are a few more drafts that are in process.
SFC met on Monday. The important work is we're trying to get the NSH document completed. We are this close. Of course, we keep being this close. But I think we have a draft 15 which addresses all of the comments the working group members made either on the list or in the meeting. So we hope to be able to hand that off. Jim and I have to do our reviews, and then I've got a shepherd write up for the AD as soon as that's done. A lot of discussion on OAM, lots of different things people want to do with OAM, different approaches to OAM. We're trying to get the framework so that we can say, okay, all of the OAM solutions have to do this much the same, and then you can do your own thing for what you want to do for the problem you want to solve, so we can get clarity. We're trying to move that work forward. There's some work on the MD types for how we carry metadata. Work is basically making good progress.
CIDR. So Sandy is not here. She didn't travel. Chris is here. So I'm going to have to shame again Sandy and Chris for not filling this out. CIDR didn't meet this week.
So actually, Alvaro, this is Chris Bowers here. You might want to check the revisions, because I went and looked at the revisions on the wiki. For example, Greg did in fact post something on beer in version 31. So you might, before shaming, I just want to, save you from that shame of false shaming. You might want to check the history there. I'm not saying that this is a case, but could be there. So because Greg's are down there in 30 and 31, I just want to point out.
Right. So Greg is there. So but for the record, we didn't actually shame Greg.
I understand. I understand. I just wanted to avoid any unnecessary shaming.
Okay, so after review of the history, I'm going to renew my shaming of Chris, not Chris Bowers, Chris Morrow, just so that we're clear, and Sandy, the chair of the CIDR working group. CIDR, as I was saying, didn't meet this time, mostly because, as you may remember from a couple of IETFs ago, we pretty much finished the work. We opened a new working group that has been meeting for the last two IETFs, where Chris is also the chair, called CIDR Ops in the Ops area, where we're now discussing, of course, operational work, et cetera. CIDR still has one draft in the working group that should be really close or already in working group last call. Once that goes through the process, we're going to close the working group. Right now, we have about 8 or 10 documents in Auth 48. The RC editor has been doing an incredible job in getting everyone synced, and we hope to, in the next few weeks, hopefully, or maybe a couple of months, publish everything as RM6.
Bruno Gran, Spring. So Spring is not meeting this week. In terms of highlights, we have the Spring conflict resolution, which is under working group last call, which is good because it has been a long discussion in 2 working groups, starting in ISIS and moving to Spring. So we're progressing. As of today, we have 8 big documents in ISG hands. And as of next stage, we still have a few ones to progress. We have started initiating a discussion on possible recharter. We may adopt a few or a couple of one in the meantime. In terms of status, we have just then sent to ISG the LDP interrupt draft. So it's part of the 8 one. And as part of the review of the OAM use case, we've got a comment that it's more than the use case. And it may be to start track, so we may have to discuss that. And finally, a big thanks to Alvaro, which has a big set of large documents to handle. So thank you all.
Pawan Biram for TEAS. We met for our regular session yesterday morning. We have what is now this customary joint Young session coming up tomorrow afternoon. In terms of highlights, the modeling work that's being done has reached an acceptable level of maturity. The T topology model is NMDA compliant now, and as per the authors, it's last call ready. The T and RSVP models are not NMDA compliant, but there are significant portions of the models which are sufficiently baked. In terms of ACTN, the framework and requirements documents are almost ready for last call. There's a request from the chairs to pull in some text from an individual draft to either one or both of these documents. Apart from that, these are sufficiently cooked. There are also a few other documents under the ACTN umbrella which are progressing quite well and getting ready for adoption. We also adopted some new work. There's this draft that talks about SR LSPs and RSVP LSPs coexistence that got adopted recently. In terms of document status, we have one new RFC, 6 for which we put in publication request in recent weeks, and there are 2 new adoptions.
And I'm glad to be last. Trill. Trill is commuting a lot of existing work. We have about 17 drafts going to working group last call. We know this because prior to the hiatus, we know this because we've been gratefully accepting the revision that the ADs did to the routing directorate. Trill had a lot of drafts that were sitting waiting for routing directorate review. There are people who have been very good to review things for us. Thanks. We have nice engineering solutions, by the way. If you're in VO3, you should really look at some of the stuff that's going through at the end. At least you can learn from what we've gained. We have areas of work that are being completed in these 17 drafts for directory service, multi-topology, multi-level security ECN. We are having this time very focused drafts on things which these reviews uncovered. For example, Trill over IP, we finally got a really terrific cool review from Magnus Westerlund, and he pointed out a whole bunch of things. Previously, we'd gotten a really good review from Alvaro and the int director on ARP optimization, and we're just talking about these things and some things with fine-grained labeling. We're presenting 1 or 2 last pieces of new work that are in the middle of adoption prior to our hiatus. And then this is one of the drafts. So if you are one of the people in routing who's asked to review all these drafts, know that ahead of time we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great, thank you to everyone who we did not shame. It's great, Sue, thank you for closing with thanking the directors. We're going to go, John is going to present a quick report on the routing directorate. We know that many of you are part of that, so thank you for that work. One of the reasons that I like this is not just that it is so exciting for everyone, but also because it informs, right, what people are doing. The work of the routing directorate. Some things that popped out at me just because I'm thinking about that is there were a couple of there's a couple of work that, for example, could be leveraged. We could leverage other people. Reviews is not only that we talked about at the beginning, but reviews is not only the work of the routing directorate. It's the work of everyone. And when we can leverage, say, other working groups, for example, there was some architectural work, I think, on multicast architecture for NVO3 or something like that. PIM is there, right? There's a bunch of multicast people in PIM. There's some work that I saw in the role report around multicast. Well, we don't have to adopt the work anywhere, but we could send it for a review. There's this work that was called just now on SR and RSVP coexistence. There's something similar in Spring for SR and LDP interoperability. So, there's some synergy, right? Not overlap necessarily, but some synergy between the working groups. And it's good that we take advantage not just of the central review opportunities that we have, but of each other. Right? If we already have expertise in the area or elsewhere in the IETF to take advantage of that. So with that, John, please, he's going to do a quick review. When I get my slides in order.
Okay, so just a quick report from the Routing Directorate covering the last 4 months. And this is on behalf of myself and Amy, who's the other coordinator for the Routing Directorate. Is there a clicker? Thanks. So just a reminder of the role of the Routing Directorate is a panel of routing area experts, and they're appointed by the ADs. We currently have 46 people on this panel. And their job is on the panel to provide expert reviews of drafts, which can either be at IETF last call, either from inside the routing area or from outside the routing area, or before we get to the IETF last call, while the documents are still in the working groups, the directorate can do early reviews on those documents. So if chairs want a sort of external pair of eyes to come in and have a look at a document to see, just to get a second opinion on it, or, just to do some sort of quality check, then the directorate do that too. We tend to assign our reviews across the directorate using round robins. So if you're on the directorate, it means you could end up with some random draft to review. You don't need to be a deep expert in that area of technology. In fact, it's usually better if you're not, because then you can sort of take a higher level view and look for wider issues, maybe check for readability or things that are not explained, which a working group will not necessarily see, but which become really important once you get the draft further along the process to the IESG. But we will occasionally handpick reviewers, so if the chair needs a particular expertise to review a draft, then we can do that too. Okay, more information on the wiki. The statistics, just to show you what the directorate has done this last IETF period, we've reviewed 32 drafts. They're about 50-50 split between IETF last call reviews and working group reviews, maybe a few more on the IETF last call. The way the drafts we've reviewed break down by area, by working group, kind of changes each time. So there's, this time we had lots from routing working group and quite a few from T's, but that's just sort of a kind of comes and goes as drafts come through the cycle. In terms of results, 3% of drafts we reviewed were not ready. I think that's just one of the 32. The rest of the time, the directorate were finding nits in 21%, finding issues, which are problems to discuss, but not necessarily blocking problems, in 58% of the drafts we reviewed, and 21% had nits, which are sort of editorial things. So, I mean, the 58% figure is key. The directorate does find real issues. Improves document quality. Is really worth having your drafts reviewed in the directorate. Mean time to review a draft by the director is about 15 days, and I think that's just a factor of the fact that most chairs ask for a 14-day deadline on the review, and people are pretty good at sticking to deadlines. And finally, just a big thank you to everyone who works in the directorate and does these reviews, because it's a non-trivial exercise. It takes time, and we're very grateful for your efforts. Adrian.
Adrian Farrell. So thank you, right back at you, for administrating this. I'd like the ADs to comment on that 58%, because clearly you're right that having the directorate find the 58% is really good, but clearly you're wrong that 58% of documents get this far with issues. Is not that, because that's not good.
I agree. That's not good. Now, one thing I want to point out is that maybe roughly half are early reviews, right, which are reviews that the chairs request earlier in the process, maybe before working group last call or at some point. Now, I think, and I don't know if this is the point that you're trying to make, but the point that I want to make is that we shouldn't expect external of the working group reviews to find the 60% of the issues, right? Because the 58% that has issues that maybe we should have resolved in the working group before. And obviously more stressing is that 3% that is not ready. Now, not all of these drafts are inside the routing area. Once in a while, when there is IETF last call of documents that are related to the routing area, we ask for review of those as well. For example, recently we went through the exercise of making the IPv6 specifications internet standards, and so we asked the directorate to review those documents because we thought they're related, strongly related to the routing area. So some of these documents, and I don't know if you have a breakdown of that or not, but some of them that may have had issues or not ready could have been those. In any case, the important thing, the important point that I want to make is that this is one of the reasons why I have said a couple times today that it is important that we review, re-review, that we all contribute to the work in the working group. I see too many plus ones and too many just yeses. Do you support? Yes, 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 in the working groups. And we should be working. Just because you trust me and you think I do a good job doesn't mean that I didn't screw up my draft. And in my personal case, I mostly do. So please review the work. And even though the program director is doing a great job, and again, we want to thank everyone for that, it is important that we do the reviews inside the working group as well.
So just to add to that, maybe next time I'll try and do 2 pie charts showing early reviews and last call reviews, because I think maybe combining them might lead you to think that more of the last call reviews had quality issues than they really did.
Hello, Anderson. I was actually going to comment on the yes and plus ones, but I don't want to do that. I want to say something totally different. I don't know about the rest of you, but I need to state how much I actually appreciate the improvement of the work in the routing area directorate over the last year, and with the people getting in and actually taking it seriously, and now we're actually doing good reviews. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, you already picked up on the 2 charts, but Alvaro mentioned that we also do reviews of outside. So if we want to measure ourselves, also maybe separate out non-routing.
It's sort of there. It's hard to read, but non-area is the top line on the right-hand chart. We did 2 out of 32.
Yeah, just for that. Oh, well, yeah. Just for that 58% thing, though.
Right. It's not statistically significant this time, but yeah, over a longer period, yeah, maybe.
And just to come back, I think it's Alvaro, so we should really try to try to review the documents earlier in the process. But I don't see anything wrong with the directorate reviewer giving a mark that it's not ready, has issues, because I don't see these as failing grades. I see this as just trying to improve. It's no different than if do an ISG review. If you get a discuss on your document, don't take it that you failed or something. It's everything is meant just to improve, and so there's nothing wrong. So we don't want that the directorate now starts giving A++s to everybody, when actually just to make this chart look good.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is, the whole point of having the reviews is constructive criticism and getting them better. But I also want to echo Alvaro's point. The responsibility for producing quality documents out of the working groups is not the directorates. It's not the area directors. It's everybody's. And one of the aspects of going to a round robin is that you're now dependent on, obviously we all have expertise, but I don't have expertise in everything. And so, it's an unfair burden on the area directors and on the directorate to expect them to be able to do all of the detailed technical quality review that needs to be coming from the working groups. And I can tell you that
I think our experience of issues when we do AD reviews, which is frequently after the routing directorate or at the same time, is probably on the well higher than 50%. So we'd really like to see better work and more reviews. Thank you.
Okay. Microphone. Okay, so now we are on to open mic. Anything you want to discuss, please get up to the mic.
John Scudder. You people who were awake through the whole lightning round, I'm sure noticed Sue talking about in the IDR portion about code point squatting, blah, blah, blah. I had considered asking you for some time during this meeting for, it's one of these boring but important topics, and I didn't get around to it or preparing any materials, but I'd like to suggest that either at one of our periodic chairs, virtual meetings or something, it might be a worthwhile topic to talk about code point allocation, and in particular, I've been surprised by the number of people, especially IETF old-timers, who you might say don't understand, or you might say have different opinions about how the different IANA allocation policies actually work. And I'm concerned that we're not making enough use of IANA to do work for us, and instead we're trying to do the work ourselves, and we're not as good at it as they are.
Sure. Please remind us to revisit that topic at some of the future chair chats. I don't know if it was the last IETF or the IETF before. Jeff did a presentation on considerations around allocation and squatting and early use and other things. I think he did it here. So please look up the materials. And I know, John, you're talking about other, further beyond that. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that whatever the RFC was for IANA considerations was just BIST. And it is now some other RFC number in the 8000 series. Most of the work that they did there, they tried to clarify some of the procedures and allocation policies and other things. It might be a good idea to also talk about that, or to get maybe IANA or someone to give us a refresher or an overview of the changes and things along those lines.
Yeah, I think that would be great. In particular, I remember Jeff's talk well, but in particular, I'm suggesting what you said, which is to focus on the IANA part of it, which I think a lot of us think we know what's in there until we go and read it, and then we're like, oh, actually it says something different.
Rick Taylor, just trying to cover a topic that was missed out because the MANE entry in the wiki was missing. Since the last meeting, we've managed to get RFC 8175 out, which is DLEP, which I think has applicability outside of MANE. If you have interest in BFD, or you're working in a core routing protocol, OSPF, ISIS, DLEP is probably of interest to you when you start to get beyond the fixed network. So can I just ask people to have a look at it, see whether it's applicable to some of the corner cases you have with your core working group work? I think this is following on from Alvaro's comment about some of the working groups are doing and producing work that has much wider applicability than just their original niche. So 8175 is worth a look.
Thanks, Rick, for that and for the reminder. Justin and Stan did a presentation maybe 2 or 3 IETFs ago about the work that had been going on in MANE, including DLEP. The fact that it could be applicable to other things was sort of lost. There was actually a lot of discussion in the ASG about that. Please go find those slides. The other thing that we had started a discussion after that presentation with some of the other working group chairs, for example, Roll, about the fact that there is, usability and then things that we can share. Just because we're doing mechanisms that we seem to be targeting at mobile, ad hoc environments or IoT environments, that doesn't mean that those aren't applicable to core networks or vice versa, right? Some of the methodology and enhancements that we're doing to core networks could be applicable in other places. Last Saturday, just to tell you a story because we have time, we spent 7 hours, and I'm not going to go through the whole 7 hours. We spent 7 hours in a coordination meeting with the IEEE. And one of the topics that we talked about was around multicast in wireless environments. And as we were discussing, one of the things was, well, we're not trying to do things like multicast and PIM, and it doesn't work over 802.11 really well. But during the discussion, we found out of some work that had been going on in 6LoW, for example, extending the 6LoW PAN neighbor discovery mechanisms that could apply or could solve some of the problems. Now, in general, we maybe, I don't know what people are thinking about that, but we see IoT enhancements and maybe we don't think they apply to other things. I'm not saying those drafts are the solution to every problem with multicasting wireless networks, but it is something that we need to consider. The more that we cross pollinate and that we talk to each other and that we reuse solutions, I think probably the better when we can, of course. So anyone else? One of the things that we keep thinking about ourselves and that we brought up for a very short discussion at the routing director and routing chairs meeting on Monday is where are we going? What's the future of the routing area or routing in general? What are the new things that we see? Many of the working groups, as you saw, are making progress. Most of the work groups, all of the work groups are making progress, some progress, faster or slower. Some of them we consider that could be to the point where we could even close some of the working groups at some point in the relatively short future. So what happens next? Are we ready for the next revolution of whatever it is? Is there work that we should be looking in the IETF, specifically in the routing area, to do? And I'm sure the answer is yes. More importantly, how do we attract that work to come to the IETF? Is there work that we're not looking at because it may be too researchy, because it may be for routers that are too big or too small or move too fast or too slow? So what we want to, we don't know the answers to any of those questions, of course, but we want to hear from you, and more importantly, we want to ask you to please work towards that as well. In other words, don't just tell us, oh, there's a new hot technology, you should bring it to the IETF. But help us do that as well. We are only 3, you are a lot more than 3. And we can, again, the responsibility is the responsibility of everyone. So if anyone has opinions, thoughts, flames are also valid, please stand up, talk about them, send us email later, talk amongst yourselves, write something down. Any other option? Okay, thank you, Rick.
Rick Taylor again. I'm the chair of Delay Tolerant Networking, which is in transport. Currently, we're not chartered to do routing because that would probably be a routing area task. But we're out of the IRTF, we're now into the IETF, and we're trying to standardize how do you push packets and data around in deeply disrupted and heavily delayed networks. So it's email 2.0 done properly. So at a certain point, we're going to have to solve these routing problems. And we're kind of transport focused, and I'd love to see more guys with the deep routing expertise who are sat in this room or sat in this room's working groups to come and help us solve these problems. Again, they're not charter items yet, but at a certain point, we're going to finish our current set of documents and we're going to re-charter, and routing is going to be there. So we'd like to kind of engage with you guys sooner rather than later.
Can I suggest, thank you for the suggestion. Can I suggest talking to Chris Bowers and Jeff Tenser, the chairs for RTGWG? This sounds like it would be a really excellent discussion for that working group to bring in and educate folks on what that problem space is, so at least people start thinking about it, know to pay attention.
Sure. I mean, my transport AD might tell me off because we're not chartered to do that work yet, but it's coming.
So RTGWG is chartered to discuss new work where we're not sure where it belongs yet. So it seems like a really perfect fit.
Perfect. So that reminded me of something else. There's this other working group called IP Wave, which is called Vehicle-to-Vehicle Communication or something like that. And they have been working right now on just running IP over 802.11 OCP. Yes. During the original charter discussion, they had routing items in there. Not only because right now they're working on how do we connect the car to the infrastructure pretty much, and how do we run IP over that layer 2 piece. But in the future, you want to probably communicate between the cars or between the car and someone else, and you are going to need some type of routing stuff in there. So the working group is not chartered to do that. But we also know that at some point, the need for the work will happen. Most likely, we might not charter that working group to do that, but we will need a place to discuss and do it. So if you have time, go to the TN, go to IP Wave, start looking at those problems because they could come to the routing area as well.
So it's kind of personal view. So we know that proximity of our workload placement stuff is coming to us. VMs containers getting out of data center, being placed somewhere else. And it's important to know how do we get the cost of getting there, how do we do this in loop-free manner and regular routing stuff. So there's some very early stuff in TS, but it will affect a lot of us and it's coming. So it's quite interesting work. Unfortunately, we need to work with Etsy on this because those are the ones who define how orchestration layer works. But it's interesting work. I think we should take it.
Just another reminder to what Ali already said. The routing area working group is chartered to take on any discussion of potential future work. In the charter, the main part of the charter actually talks about how the routing area working group can serve as a mini BOF type place, right, where we can go discuss things that maybe it's not mature enough for an actual BOF. The other things that the IESG, for example, has been making statements over the last few years has been around that we can accelerate work. We don't need to go through 2 BOFs and one non-working group forming one, and then something else, and then whatever, and then figure out a bunch of other documents before we can actually start work. If work is well-defined, well understood, and more importantly, not only something that is interesting for the IETF, but something that people are going to actually work on, then we can see about doing something about it. If it's my idea, as much as it would be a great idea, but it's only me who's interested in it, then it's probably not something that we're going to want to work on. So, part of this also is socializing the potential work that we would want to do, so that we get some support behind us and some people to actually write and again review documents. Any other thoughts, ideas? Then I guess we're going to leave you the remaining 45 minutes to go brainstorm this topic and talk among yourselves. In case you need the coffee, there's a little coffee place across the street as well.
And just a reminder, we only have 1 BOF this time, but we really, really are open and interested in bringing in new work and other communities, and we need your help to do that.
Thank you. You can go. Or you can sit here. That doesn't matter to me.
Unfortunately, that BOF was cross-scheduled against Yang. I haven't sent email. I think I can make Thursday. I didn't look at the list. Is everybody coming? Invited. Everyone invited.
Well,
I was sleepy. I've not been feeling good. I don't know. I've been sleeping weird. And now I'm sneezing. I'm like, oh man. It's not bad. I mean, like, it's just I'm sleeping odd.
what I asked was, what are top 5 things to do?